The psychedelic revolution is here. If you want to integrate your visionary experiences into your purpose, get clear on your entrepreneurial path, and help people while you do what you love, then this podcast is for you. Welcome to The Psychedelic Entrepreneur, Medicine for These Times. I'm your host, Beth Weinstein. I'm a spiritual business coach, 3-time entrepreneur, and a lifelong student of psychedelics and sacred plant medicines. You carry your own unique medicine, and your medicine is what we need for these times. This podcast will help you to share your medicine so you can create transformation in the world. Listen in on conversations with psychedelic leaders, changemakers, and conscious entrepreneurs who are living proof that a better world is possible when you follow your heart and live in alignment with your soul. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Psychedelic Entrepreneur, Medicine for These Times. Today, I'm really excited to have a special guest, Nessi Gomes. Hey, Nessi, thanks for being with us.
Absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you so much, Beth.
So if you don't know Nessi, I'll tell you a little bit about her. So born on the tiny British island of Guernsey, singing and music became Nessi's way of dealing with challenging life circumstances. From a young age, she discovered the ability to transform discomforts and unspoken emotions by exploring sound, and has continued to root herself more and more in the therapeutic value of sonic expression. Nessi's creative turning point took place 7 years ago upon settling in the community of PachaMama in Costa Rica. The nature of the place has reshaped and deepened her approach towards music, therapy, and self-healing. In the past 4 years, Nessi has shared her music and voice retreats in 25 countries. In October 2016, she released her debut album, Diamonds and Demons, and received Best of British Unsigned Female Artist for that year. Nessi Gomes is a musician with a bachelor's in creative expressive therapies and music from Derby University, and also has a diploma with the British Academy of Sound Therapy in group voice therapy. And she says, using my voice has helped me on so many levels, nurturing my spiritual, emotional, and physical well-being. For 20 years, working with my voice has revealed so much about who I am. It has particularly helped me to connect to the more difficult emotions and give them a channel, allowing this energy to shift and transform. Sound can act as a bridge so that we are able to connect to the joy of our unique expression and to unleash it in its complete beauty safely. I love this. So let's hear a little bit about your story, which I have actually never heard. I just know you through the medicine music and, the beautiful music you've been putting out there all these years. And then the vocal Odyssey work, and just, being like you and your partner produced this really amazing sound music concert in the middle of COVID. I remember that was just very profound. But let's hear your story. How'd you get on this path to being a musician and teaching vocal therapy? And were you ever on a different career path?
Well, I guess, my journey started at quite a young age. So around about the age of 14, 15, I was quite a troubled kid, and growing up on this island in Guernsey wasn't such an easy time. Also, I think back in those days, people didn't travel so much, and so, being Portuguese descent, my entire family are Portuguese, so I felt pretty isolated in some ways. I mean, I did have, of course, beautiful times growing up here, but I also remember a lot of times feeling quite disconnected and separate, and not feeling that I truly belonged. And as well, growing up in quite a strict Portuguese family, like my father, who I love dearly, and I say this with, utmost respect, but, he was doing the best he could at those times with the tools that he had. But he was very protective, to the point where it just kind of stifled me. So from very two different angles, it kind of created a lot of challenges for myself. And I kind of turned to music. Not that I had any kind of musical background. I didn't have any training in music, but I was very drawn to exploring my voice and I suffered a lot from depression at that time, or a lot of mental health issues. I was self-harming. I was suicidal. On a few occasions, I even tried to take my own life, and thankfully that never kind of manifested. But it definitely ignited this path for me, in the sense that it was through singing and through using my voice that massively contributed to my healing journey. And it was kind of intuitive. It wasn't like what we know now, the research that's happening around sound therapy and voice therapy is, there's a lot of that now, and it's very popular and becoming quite mainstream. But back then it was, I guess the only thing we knew at that point, or at least what I was aware of, was music can really enhance our mood state. We can listen to a piece of music and it can change and alter our state of consciousness from, going through, sad emotions and then being transformed into feeling more uplifted and happy. But for me, with the voice, it was my way of dealing with a lot of internal kind of sadness and separation. And I didn't really, I guess at that age anyway, it's quite a tender age, 14, you're kind of transitioning into womanhood. You're not quite yet a woman, and you're no longer a kid, and it's really confusing. And so, yeah, like music and exploring my voice was really my way to kind of reclaim my life and my life source. And that started a journey for me. I then, I was in bands. I was like playing music from the age of 15. I was in a funk band for like 5 years. I was doing all sorts of, funny little gigs and playing in pubs and, to rowdy drunk people. And I guess then I went traveling. I think when you grow up on such a small island, you're a natural born traveler. You want to get out, you want to see the world beyond your little perimeter. So I traveled a lot, and it was only until I was probably 24 then I first heard about music therapy, and this blew my mind. I was just like, oh my God, this is exactly what my path has been. Like, of course I've been doing it for entertainment, but that was my starting point, was using music and singing as a form of healing. So I studied that for 3 years, and then I came back home, and I decided to travel to South America at the age of 29. And it was the first time that I'd heard about plant medicines, ayahuasca. And I first came across that in Peru, but I never did any ceremonies at that time because I was so naive, and I thought, it's really calling me, but I don't feel right now this is the time to explore that. I didn't really have the kind of, what's the word? I didn't really see how I could like go into a ceremony where I'd feel safe with some random person. And I think when I was like 19, I did my first LSD, and it was like horrendous. I had like the worst experience of my life, and I thought I'll never do that again. But something about ayahuasca was kind of calling me, but it wasn't the time to do it in Peru. So I kind of put it at the back of my mind, and I continued my travels in South and Central America. And it was only until I came to PachaMama. I went to Costa Rica initially to visit a friend, and I'd heard about this community called PachaMama, that they kind of welcomed people from outside, and you could take part in a kind of work exchange program. So I signed up for this for a 5-week program of kind of working in the community. And it was there where I first actually did my first ayahuasca ceremony. And I couldn't have, found a better place to start my journey with plant medicine. And that, for me, which was in 2010, I believe, that was, I guess, a massive turning point in my life. It was also the time where I met my husband, who had been living there for 12 years. But it kind of transformed and changed my life 180 degrees. Everything that I thought I knew about life was thrown out the window, and it was like this new perspective on living. And so, yeah, it changed my music that very night. After my first ceremony, I went back to my little casita and I wrote my first kind of song from that angle. And since then, I guess, yeah, it just really transformed the way I was kind of working with writing my songs, and started my whole journey with my music in that kind of sense. Music has always been a huge part of my life, but I never saw myself doing it professionally in that way where I'm kind of touring internationally. It was never my vision. You know, I never had the vision that I was like, right, I'm going to be like some kind of medicine musician and I'm going to travel the world. Like, in fact, that going into that was it was quite challenging for me because I had to kind of break through a lot of unhelpful beliefs that I'd carried from such a young age. And so the recording process of my first album, it was it was, of course, it was so nourishing and it gave me so much, but it was equally so painful. You know, it's just like, oh, like breaking through each song and having to be with myself in the studio and pierce through this, like, it's like a rebirth of what I thought I was and who I was becoming through the songs and getting them down and recorded. So that was only when I came back to England. I lived in PachaMama for 3 years, and both myself and my husband, we felt like, okay, it's time for a new chapter. And we left PachaMama, we left Costa Rica, and we started our new life actually, we were hovering between Israel and England for some time, because my husband's originally from Israel and I'm from Guernsey. So we didn't really know where we wanted to be located. But it was once we kind of located in the UK that we started to record. And I recorded with Duncan Bridgman, who created this amazing musical piece called One Giant Leap back in the 90s. So that was kind of how it all started. And then it was during that period of time as well that I came across the British Academy of Sound Therapy. And, you know, because I did music therapy in my degree, but I was really like, okay, for me, it's the voice. This is my story. And I really want to kind of go deeper into that. So I started to explore that, and I studied with them and became certified with them. And it's just really a tapestry, you know. Like, I remember, like, when I finished my degree, you know, for some years after, I thought, oh, that was probably one of those things that people do and it's just done and you're not really utilizing it. And now I see, like, from all the work that I've been doing, how it's so integrated and such a huge part of my path as well as the music, you know, becoming a musician in this sense, you know, like, rather than being an entertainer, you know, which was never really my story, because the songs I wrote was so delicate, and, you know, singing them in a pub in Guernsey weren't it wasn't really the right kind of place to present it. However, saying that, it's also the perfect place to practice, you know, because no one's really listening. They're just doing their own thing, getting drunk, whatever. But yeah, so all of, you know, I found this kind of this tribe where, you know, global tribe where this music was starting to be received in such a beautiful way. And yeah, like, it's just been unfolding in that way. And so I'm kind of working with the music, and I do my vocal Odyssey work as well with my husband. And it's been a really beautiful journey, and it's nothing that I envisioned, you know. It's like, you think you have plans for life, and actually life makes plans for you. And so many times there was like these knocks on my kind of door, and it was like, do I walk through this door? Do I, you know? And it's like life just kept presenting opportunities for me, and it's kind of mind blowing. I'm still like, what? You know, in a humble way, you know, like, just kind of pinching myself that, you know, that my life has been so, I feel so blessed, and what a gift to be able to share my music in this way, and for it to be received in such intimate moments. You know, most of the people that reach out to me talk to me or share with me that they heard my music in ceremony and how it's massively like touched them or helped them in a really difficult moment. And that is such an honor, you know? So yeah, I guess that's a little bit of, there's so many angles, but that's, I guess, the bottom line of.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. And yeah, I love what you just said about the doors that open and kind of wondering, do I walk through that? Or, I'm curious, in your bio, or it was, I think somewhere maybe on your website or both that I read about, being put through these like kind of dark nights, right? Like I'm sure you've had the ups and downs, like pretty much every human has had, especially on this path to really coming into what I believe is like your soul, right? Your soul
Yeah.
is on this journey, and you're like, what's happening? And do I say yes? And I'm curious, if you feel that the medicine path that you were on like helped you be more open to those doors or say yes, or I'm wondering, like, have you ever thought about, would this have all manifested without the medicine or without that experience at PachaMama?
I don't, that's a really good question, because before PachaMama, before I, stepped into this beautiful new world, I was a kind of woman that had everything planned. Like my best friend who I was traveling with would always like make fun of me because my 2 years was already set out for me. There was something about having these moments of the unknown that I couldn't handle. Like everything had to, I just had to have everything set out. So when I was in PachaMama, like, it was in my 5th week that I was meant to leave. And this was also the time that I met my husband. And I was at the beginning of a body cleanse. So I was juicing, I wasn't eating. And it was, that in itself was just giving me the clarity. I just remember it clear as day. The voice that came through was like, you've got to stay. Like, you have to stay. And at first I was like, yeah, but I can't stay because I've got this ahead of me. I've got that planned and I'm going to do this. But then I was just really listening to that. And I was like, okay, I'm going to listen to that. But I definitely think, the medicine world, I mean, also like what I was doing during that time, like going through a whole kind of purification of the body and stuff. So it was opening up my consciousness and making me feel like I had more clarity about my life. But for sure, I think I learned to trust the signals of life. Like and I felt it also when I was creating my album, because I had so many moments where I was mind fucking, and, it was like, I don't know, that higher voice was just so strong and it kept speaking to me. And I think because of the work with the medicine and the work in PachaMama, because it's not just medicine work there, they do, therapy work and also like, meditation, silent retreats, which also massively contributed, to clearing out all the garbage in my head so that I could have the clarity and I could start reading the signs of life, So to answer your question, yes, but it came from many angles, not just the medicine, but I guess the medicines of silence, the medicine of clearing the body, the medicine of the voice. I started to reconnect to the wonder of life, that life can be wondrous and magical and not everything is visible, and we have these amazing guides that will communicate to us. And a lot of my songs that were inspired through the medicine, these voices came through, and that's what's kind of been transmission through the lyrics.
Beautiful. Yeah. And that's exactly it. It's like there's the medicine and then there's everything is medicine. So thank you for clarifying that. But let's talk about Vocal Odyssey and what this is all about. This is why I wanted to bring you on. It's interesting. So I'm a business coach. I help people start and grow their business. I tend to work with a lot of people on the medicine path or people who are, deeply spiritual and have awakened to the power of how psychedelics and sacred plant medicines have shifted their life. I actually bring in a friend of mine who does very similar, like vocal alchemy type work, because it's had such a profound impact on my life. I started working with her back about 4 or 5 years ago, thinking, oh, I just want to sing well in a ceremony. And now I almost don't even care about the singing, because now it's been so much deeper than that. And then
Yeah.
the singing has come through as a byproduct. But let's hear about how Vocal Odyssey came about. Did this, come channel through you, or was this a demand that people were saying, like, Nessi, teach me how to sing like you? How did this come through?
Well, I guess it's a whole combination. Like I mentioned, I studied music therapy, and then it led me into voice therapy. I was just really narrowing it down, and because that was my first call, right? That was my first connection. Was like, and I couldn't really sing when I started. It wasn't like I opened my mouth and it is what it is today. It was pretty, out of control voice, but I loved it, and I remember the way it made me feel, and the journey that I've been on, with the voice, and all the gifts I've received from working with the voice. And, over the years, before I even started Vocal Odyssey, I would have a few friends kind of approach me and be like, oh, I would really love you to teach me how to sing. And I never really called me, I was like, I don't know if that's really my story. Like, I don't see myself as a vocal coach, teaching people the scales, because I never had that kind of background. It was more about the relationship to our voice and the medicine of our voice. And then, of course, training with the British Academy of Sound Therapy, that really opened up my understanding and relationship to this path. And so I wanted to create a container for people to meet their voice in the most simple, raw way, because I think in some ways our voice can be the most vulnerable parts of ourselves, right? It's how we communicate what we need in this life, who we are in this life, and just feeling how to feel more grounded with our expression, not necessarily just through speaking, but also singing and sounding. But actually, Vocal Odyssey is so beyond the act of just singing a nice song, right? It's really about reclaiming parts of our life, and seeing how we can move forward as individuals with our expression. So it's obviously been evolving over the years, and it's constantly being tweaked, and I get to work with amazing teachers myself who I massively admire, who's in the same path and doing the same kind of work. um, it's just one of those, and it's something we all have, right? It's like, so many of us, we all have a voice, but I think through our conditioning and through our education, we've been cut from such a young age, oh, you shouldn't sing, or you don't sound very good, or even if you're speaking up for yourself, and it's like, what do you don't know what you're talking about, which is something that I often heard in my family home, and I think it is also maybe, being a woman, like having, feeling like a second class citizen because I'm a woman, so I don't know what I'm talking about, or I shouldn't have an opinion, so there was so many layers to this. And I did my first workshop in PachaMama in 2016. I believe it was 2016. And it blew my mind. Like, it was a mixed group, and I was so nervous because it was the first time I was facilitating this work. And again, it's like whenever we step into something new, it really shakes us. But I was just blown away of how it can make us feel so connected, like sounding together. It doesn't matter if out of key, or of course you have to go through the layers. There's always the first initial step of going through the layers, peeling back the resistance, and working through the kind of unhelpful beliefs that we carry. And then once we kind of break through that, it's like you just become one voice. And then this voice is like beyond the act of singing. It's something, like it becomes our prayer. It becomes, our truth. It becomes a universal sound, or a unified sound. And So it's been so nourishing to be on that path. And in the last year, I've been mostly working with women. So when COVID came along and the pandemic hit and everything got cancelled, all our work got cancelled. And we moved everything online after a year. And we, I had quite a few doubts of how this would work in an online way. And it's just been incredible. It's been so amazing. And I've done a handful of mixed groups, but most of my groups have been working specifically with women, and working with certain themes, one of them being a woman and how it is to be a woman and be in your truth and be in your expression, whether it's singing or voicing or speaking. And it's been incredibly healing for me as well, facilitating this work. It's not that I know anything in particular. Of course, I've got my tools and stuff, but I'm equally learning and healing and growing through this path. And it's like just to help one another kind of raise up.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Yeah, no, this is a lot really resonated when I started doing this kind of stepping back into my voice, because I was very similar. As a kid, I sang. When you're a kid, before you hear the first criticism, I just sang. And I remember um, being a little kid and making up songs and singing out loud. And then I remember the moment when someone made fun of me. And I didn't know, it's like I didn't know what I was doing was like weird or different or didn't make sense until that adult pointed it out. And I remember that was the moment I just kind of shut it off.
Yeah.
So when I started going into this work of like, maybe I do have a voice, it was very deep. I mean, it was kind of like being in an ayahuasca ceremony with no ayahuasca, where it was like, I mean, I had physical things come up. I had an old injury in my body that I was like, what is that pain? And I hadn't felt it for years. And I was like, oh, that's that injury from when I was like 15 years old. But what I started noticing was how much just doing this, sounding work, like not singing, but just making sounds, it started freeing me up. I started feeling more confident to put my voice out there on the internet with or without criticism, because, these days you can't say anything because someone gets upset. And it felt very liberating and also quite scary. I'm wondering, do a lot of other people that you work with in these workshops or retreats experience the same like deep stuff coming to surface,
Yes.
or, memories of childhood?
Definitely. I mean, for me, it's like the voice is a bit like a detoxification process. So the moment you start working with the voice, it could start resonating with a certain part of your being. It could resonate with a memory. You could be giving a sound and it triggers a memory, or it kind of starts communicating with the body physically. So maybe you start to feel certain sensations of the body. Sometimes people also mention that they have kind of altered state of experiences, like as if they're like you said, kind of being in an ayahuasca trip, like you're just tripping, but like in a kind of conscious way. You're not like totally gone, but you're like, so working with sound, and especially like, I guess the voice, because it's in us, right? It's nothing external. It's totally in our body. And imagine what that's doing to our bones, to our cells, to our blood, to everything, right? Sound is the quickest thing that creates a conversation with our system, so we can feel sound physically, we can feel it emotionally, we can feel it mentally. Like, I've had sessions with people individually and in group work where they start getting downloads. They start, they've just kind of put themselves into such an altered state that it just opens a portal, and they start getting all this clarity and stuff that they've been dealing with. They're like, oh my God, like, I get it as well, once, because it also softens the ego state, right? It might trigger the ego state. It might, there might be a moment where it's activated, but if once it's softened and it's open, that's when all we can access, other layers of, to understanding, you know, other layers of our understanding, and receiving a different perspective to something that we've been dealing with, whether it's physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. So it what you're saying completely makes sense.
It was very strange, like for someone who didn't really understand the science of it at the beginning. Over the years I've started to understand, like, oh, this is how it works within the body and the nervous system, and the trauma we hold inside of ourselves and the energy
Yeah.
imprints that have been there for generations. Which is when I actually started thinking, like, whoa, this has huge potential. I mean, it's like to me, it's a different form of somatic therapy. It's just,
Yeah.
sound versus maybe like, movement. But I'm curious, as someone who's been on the medicine path and around the medicine community, there's a big conversation around integration, which is a huge part of this podcast, is about integrating it into what you're doing with yourself, what you're doing with your purpose or your life's work. Because work is, it's a big part of our life. How can this sound, the vocal Odyssey work or sound therapy, be used as an integration tool? Because as psychedelics and sacred medicines are growing in popularity, I personally believe that there's going to be more of a need for this kind of work and
Yeah.
other modalities as well. It's not just about drink more medicine, take more mushrooms, voila. It's a holistic conversation. But I'm curious, where do you see this going, and what have you noticed over the years, like how things are changing in this realm?
I mean, like, I definitely think it's a beautiful tool to use for integration, because it is a holistic tool in the sense that it incorporates every aspect of ourselves, from our breath to our physical body, softening the ego state, opening the heart, making us feel more connected to our spirit. And I've just recently come back from Rhythmia, where I've been doing some work there, and I was using, I had some classes with the voice work, and just using this tool as a way to help them maybe process through any kind of residue. Maybe they had a strong night, and there's something still lingering. So giving them tools of how to integrate that into their process. Of course, it's up to each individual how they wish to take that forward, but definitely with you on that, in the sense that integration is so important. And I think voice work in that sense can be such an amazing tool for that, because of the holistic properties, the fact that it does engage everything. It does engage every part of our being. And I think I'd like to see more of that, I guess, as well. But it was really beautiful to have the opportunity to work in that way, where people had just come out of ceremony, and get to use these tools with them as a way to maybe work through any blocked energy that's still lingering. And it was really humbling and beautiful, and you see the tears coming, and you see things people are processing just through the voice. But it's in a safe way, right? It's not kind of like putting them in a bad place or anything like that. It's just helping them process whatever needs to be processed.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about you as a troubled teenager and feeling depressed and going through all that and kind of discovering this on your own. I'm curious, how does this work? Like, I mean, I know a little bit of the science. I think it's science. I'm assuming there's this science behind how we can use our own voice to heal our body, our mind, our spirit. Because I've noticed, like the days that I chant or the days that I sing, I definitely am in a better mood. It's
Yeah.
like it's kind of instantaneous. And I've never really paid attention to that better mood thing until recently, where I was like, wait, there is something to this. And why is it that my friends that are regular musicians that sing all the time, they just seem to be happier people? But do you
Yeah.
know, like, what is actually happening, like on a physical or a energetic, like, is there an explanation for this with all the academia?
I mean, there is like there's many angles to it, and I know that like with the sound, when you're working with sound, you're kind of working also with a brainwave state, right? So right now we might be in kind of waking state, alter, and like for some people they might be living very hectic life, so they're in this very I don't know even know which state it is, but kind of super activated, finding it very hard to relax, very hard to kind of wind down. And when we sing, and when we so for a start, if you think about chanting or if you think about toning, something simple as toning, you're just holding that note in one way, right? So what you're doing is you're also releasing the breath very slowly. So you're encouraging the breath to work differently than what you would when you're speaking. Yeah. So sound in that way, um, when you're singing, you're able to kind of relax the system through using, the breath becomes slower. That's like one example. It also helps to, so then you're relaxing the system, and then you're also going into a different kind of brainwave state. So you're maybe dropping into something similar to meditation. People that sit in silence, they're kind of dropping into that alpha theta state. And you can do that really quickly also with singing, because it's altering your brainwave state. And it's just relaxing you. It's relaxing you, and it's doing many things. I guess I don't know all the ins and outs of the science around it, but I know those basic kind of things.
Mm. Yeah, and I'm curious, do you believe on a like a spiritual energetic level that it opens our channel, like to some degree of whatever we might interpret that as? I mean, that's one thing I've noticed where when I dove really deep into finally like getting regular with my voice and my vocal work, it was kind of like, when I speak now, like if I go do a Zoom workshop, and just speak to a whole bunch of people, I don't recognize who's talking very often. It's like, oh, is that coming out of me? That's just coming through me. And that didn't happen to me, 8 years ago. I'm curious, like, do you find that, I mean, to some level that it is kind of opening up that central
Definitely.
channel?
Definitely. I mean, that's why I called it Vocal Odyssey, meeting with the spirit of your voice.
Mm.
Because for me, it's like when I'm not in the way, in the sense that I'm not judging what's coming through, it's like you're literally having a direct connection with spirit. That is my experience. Maybe that's not for everybody, but that's my experience. And if, you know, this work is not anything new. It's been around since millennia. It's using chanting and sound for healing it's ancient. This is not new. It's just becoming very kind of popular now, and people are doing the research, and there is a lot of science behind it of why it is so powerful. The fact that it also, singing is a mood booster. It releases hormones in the body. It releases what's it? Is it serotonin? No, what's it? That love hormone. What do you call it? I should know it. That's it. Oxytocin.
Yeah.
And it also reduces cortisol, so the stress hormone. So that is why probably you notice that your friends are really happy, and I noticed that myself. I could be having such a rubbish day, and the moment I've just been like giving myself half an hour of singing or sounding, I'm like, oh God, yeah, of course. Like I've been doing this for years, and why am I not going there so more often? Like I instantly notice that I feel better, but for sure it connects me to spirit. If I'm really just there, present. For me, it's my working meditation. I was never really good. When I lived in PachaMama, we'd have like meditation every night for 45 minutes. I was terrible. Like I would never, it was always really hard for me to do that. But the moment I sing, or, I'm playing some dreamy little kind of improvisation on my guitar and letting my voice just flow, I'm just there. I'm fully present. It just brings me into the moment and it dissolves all my worries. It makes me feel like a happier person. You know, I feel more uplifted. I feel like I've given myself a bit of a spring clean. I'm like,
Mm.
oh, I feel so much lighter now, you know, which is why I guess when I was young and too, you know, really troubled, and I just felt like I had so much dark energy inside of me, which I did, you know, that was my truth. I was so messed up, and to the point that I ended up in hospital at the age of 15 by taking an overdose. And it was through singing that I managed to clear whatever, without having to go into the story, without having to go into any kind of narrative of why I felt like that and what caused it. You know, I had talking therapy after that incident. You know, I was seeing a therapist for about 6 months, and she was wonderful. And these sessions would last maybe an hour, and sometimes they were great, but often I would leave that 1 hour session being like, okay, great. I've just spoken about all the shit that's happened in my life, and I don't know what to do with it now. It's all kind of bubbled up. I'm like clinging on to this narrative. I was so tired of telling this story, you know? And what I loved about singing or voicing, because it wasn't like I was, you know, doing much in that sense of writing at that too much at that stage. It was just giving sound to all this stuff that was coming, you know, that was bubbling up inside of me. And I didn't have to give it a narrative. I didn't have to give it of why I was feeling like that and how I can move forward. You know, I was just in it. I was just feeling it. I was giving it a voice, and it would leave me, you know, and at the same time, I would feel more connected to my being. So I felt like that was spirit as well. It's just like cleaning my system with it. And that's why I'm such a passionate advocate of the voice, and that you don't need to be a good singer to receive the benefits of working with the voice. You know, it's like we all have this, but just through, I guess, through the Western world, the Western education, we're just like taught that it's something that you've got to be talented at. And, you know, you think of X Factor and all that, and everyone laughs at the people that come and sing and they're out of tune and whatever. It's like becomes comical. And it's like, I think of all the tribes in the world and how music and art and all that is so integrated into their culture. It's not like they're going to do a music lesson now. It's like part of who they are. It's part of their life. It's part of, you know, it's a way of life. It's not something like they have to do a course on, you know. So that's what I feel like I want to do in this life, at least for now, is to give that power back to people, you know, including myself, and help us reclaim parts of ourselves through the voice. Because I don't think we were given a voice just for speaking. We were given a voice for healing, you know, for beauty, for connection with, you know, something bigger than ourselves, you know, so that we could connect with the spirit world, or, you know, with our inner spirit, you know. And maybe for some people, they'll probably listen to this and be like, what is she on about, you know? And that's fair enough, you know, it's not for everyone, but that was my path. This is how I relate to music. And sometimes that connection's not there. Like I can play a song and I don't feel that connection. And it could be because I'm getting in the way. I'm judging it. I'm wanting to achieve something. My, you know, like that, again, coming from that Western path of like, you know, achieving and goal orientated, and that creeps in, you know, and I can see how that gets in the way of my creative flow as well, of just being an open vessel for that beauty to come through, and without necessarily having to get it down on paper, just let it be. Let God come through you, you know?
Yeah, it's been such a lesson to just be okay, like sounding what I am, you know, instead of like being good, or do I sound good, or is that okay, or was I, you know. And it's really shifted a lot in my whole life because it represents so much. It's like, well, am I doing this for the achievement or to please someone, or to make myself feel better or for some other need, right? Which is kind of comes back to a deep wound versus doing it for my soul, doing it for what just needs to come through, and being okay with, whatever comes out. And that's where there was a huge shift, which I think for me has had such a profound effect on my life, where I'm like, well, wait a second, I can apply that to everything I ever do, where it's not doing it for, and you're right, it's very Western, like the getting to something or having to have something, and actually just like doing it for the pure healing and enjoyment and the freedom, the liberation. Which actually brings me to my question. You mentioned that you work with a lot of women, and I know this myself, especially growing up in the generation I grew up in, being a woman with a voice out there, especially out on the internet or out in, the psychedelic and plant medicine world, where it's like a very touchy realm and there's a lot of opinions. And these days, it doesn't matter what work you're doing, there's a lot of opinions about everything. And it's very easy to get shut down. It's very easy to like mute yourself and censor your voice. And I mean, I've gotten like this, I go through these waves of like, oh, maybe I should just quit everything and go hide under a rock for the rest of my life.
Me too.
Trust me, I'm like, one day the internet will just be gone. No, I'm kidding. But it is a common thing I've noticed for women. It's like we are not as empowered. I think it's changing. But have you seen a lot of women that you've worked with like come out of their shell and feel like, oh, now I feel much more confident to just be who I am out there in the world and not be afraid of the judgment and the criticism and the possibly even losing friends or family? Have you seen this over the years? I'm curious.
I definitely have seen it, that I've witnessed that, and it's always a glorious moment to see that kind of rebirth, and it happens quite immediate, maybe, especially with like the online work. I see how profound it is for so many women, and it's so touching. And I feel so deeply honored to be able to kind of walk that path with them. And you're reading the comments, you read what people are going through and the breakthroughs that people are having. And it's really amazing. It's so deeply humbling and so beautiful to see that happen in such a short space of time. Whether or not that keeps going, I hope at least a seed has been planted, and that it gives them, those little steps to keep going, because at least, for my journey, it's not like something happened overnight, right? It's like you have to keep working on it. You have to keep tending to that garden and keep watering and nourishing those parts of ourselves, because those voices creep back in so easily. It's like, it's amazing how quick we can forget. And I say this for myself, and that's another reason why I love doing this work, because it also nourishes my path and my journey with this work, and helps me to remember the amount of fog and garbage that gets layered, especially as women. And, whether it's like, comparing ourselves or judging ourselves or, jealousy or whatever. It's just, there's so many layers, and there's nothing better than coming together as women and just dropping all this stuff, even if it's just for those 2 days where we can come back to remembering our power, remembering our essence, remembering our beauty, remembering that we're worthy, that we are safe amongst these people, and how to be vulnerable, also how to use our vulnerability as a superpower rather than something that should be ashamed of, right? So I definitely see that, and I'm, the retreats that I do, like we do once a year, like a 10-day retreat in Greece, vocal Odyssey retreat. It's mixed group, it's for everyone. And, I'm still obviously in connection with a lot of them. We had like WhatsApp groups, and the bonding that happens, the connection, the empowerment that they go through. I know these are all cliched words, but it's the truth. That's what I'm witnessing. It's like, it's so sincere, and you just see especially when men and women come together and we're sharing that space together, and the amount of healing that happens through that, with, the men being present to witness the women come into their power and like give their voice, it's, and also for the women to hold the men and for them to be in touch with their vulnerability is, I mean, it's just like, oh, it is so beautiful. And that's why I say it's so beyond the act of singing. It's just really such a great tool for feeling connected and healing and so many things, as well as singing beautiful songs together, right? Of course there's that element, but there's a lot of work that we do, deep healing work through the voice that has nothing to do with singing a song.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, can we get more men to do this work? Because you said it's super vulnerable. It's like even just doing it alone. It's like there's this part of me where I've had these moments where I just break out crying and I'm like, I don't even know what's going on. But it's, I know it's a lot of moving the energy and moving a lot of the stories of like, am I worthy enough? Am I good enough? The PTSD from, I have like church choir PTSD. I have school singing PTSD, like all these moments throughout my childhood of shutting down my voice. And now finally, all these years later, being able to be like, okay, like it is important. Everybody's voice is a tool. It's an instrument for expression. To me, every voice on this planet is needed. And yes, the world we're in is just going to be, it is what it is right now. And hopefully it's not forever where there's going to be so many opinions, but it really is important to own your voice and own your truth and know that it's just, it's life. It's okay. You are worthy of sharing your voice. So Nessi, tell us, what do you have planned for the future? You mentioned a retreat in Greece, which I seriously want to sign up for it now. I think it's like next year though, right? Like 23?
So we have one happening in October. That's fully booked. But we have one happening in April. I think April the 29th till May the 9th, something like that.
Amazing.
And that's open. So that's a 10-day vocal Odyssey retreat. On a beautiful island called Armagos. It will be our third time or fourth time going there. And we love it there. It's so beautiful. So that's the physical work. I'm still like working with the online work as well, because things are not fully open. But even if things were open, it's still a really beautiful platform.
Yeah.
So I like to keep that. So that happens. I've got one. I've got a workshop coming up next weekend, and then I'll be back in autumn, in September and October, for another online journey. And then I'm on tour this coming summer. So in Europe, I'll be traveling. I've got about 20, quite a few concerts in 3 weeks. So I'm going to Poland, Slovakia, Germany, Holland, Spain, UK. So I have a good handful of gigs coming up, which will be the first time properly touring since the pandemic.
Wow.
I'm slightly excited, but like, oh my God, I'm going to be in front of like big crowds again. I don't know how I'm going to handle that, but I'm sure it's going to be absolutely fine. And I'm equally excited about that.
US tour at all? Or
I think
Costa
we're going to plan that. I think we're going to plan that for next year. We're going to head out to the States in 2023. Coming back to Costa Rica in December. We'll be back at Rhythmia, Blue Spirit. So I have some few weeks there doing some work with the voice and singing in ceremony as well. So
Beautiful. Yeah. I'm curious, maybe this is on the back burner, but it's something that came through. Have you considered doing like a training, like a practitioner training to train people to teach this?
I think, you know what? I have thought about it, but I just don't think that's where I'm at right now in my life. Maybe when I'm older, but I have such a beautiful mentor and teacher in the UK, the British Academy of Sound Therapy, Liz Cooper. She is the queen in this field. Like, this is exactly what she does. She is training people to work with not only voice, but with other sound, sonic kind of healing instruments like gongs. And I mean, she is like, I don't think I could be, I'd be able to top that. She's really incredible. And the work that she shares is just mind blowing. And I love her approach. And if anybody is feeling a call to work with sound or voice, I highly recommend checking out British Academy of Sound Therapy if they want to become practitioners themselves. And it just gives you the backbone, right? It gives you the backbone to this work. It's not just intuition, which is wonderful, but you really get to understand why it's so powerful and why it's so needed as well.
Amazing. And then albums coming out or...
Albums. So I'm working with an amazing musician called Zoe Pollock, and we'll be releasing a small little EP in the near future this year. In the next coming months, we're going to release our first single together, which I'm super excited about. And she's amazing as well. So you got to check her out, Zoe Pollock.
Beautiful. And then I'm curious, one more thing. How do you feel about people singing your songs out there? And
I love it.
Okay. Like, I love we don't have to ask you for permission to sing it in a ceremony.
No. I hate all that. Like, if my songs have touched you, for me, that is such a gift. Like, if you want to sing them in ceremony, if you want to play them in concerts, for me, this is the ultimate compliment. For people to sing my music is just a massive compliment. So no one has to, get permission in that sense, unless they're, they want to like put it on their album and stuff like that or whatever. But really, it's such a gift. And I feel so honored that people feel, connected to my music in that way, that they want to sing it themselves. So I'm really deeply touched whenever people do sing it.
Oh, good. That frees me up a little.
Go for it, Beth.
Now I just need to do it one of these days. No, I occasionally I'll come out with a song, and it's been a journey, but this is why you're here. I wanted people to hear about this. This work is so important. I truly feel like this voice work is where the future is at. There's, it's growing. You're one of the top people I know out there doing this. And I think it's going to be very helpful with the whole psychedelic path of integration as well. So
totally. Yeah. Totally. Yeah.
I'm so excited for you in the future. We're going to have all your links to follow you, the European tour, join the Vocal Odyssey online program, which I think, the one next week. And then there's one in the fall. Yes. Nessi, thank you so much for being with us. And thank you so much for sharing your voice. It is just so needed right now. I can't tell you enough. I keep saying, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm right. Who knows? We'll see. But I keep saying there's going to be a day where the medicine music of the world is the mainstream music. This is going to be the mainstream. To me, it's already going there, but
it is. I think Spotify just recently made, an editorial playlist called Healing Songs. And, a couple of my songs were featured on that. So that's really exciting. But it's coming that way. But I think also there's so much amazing music out there, even if it's not connected directly to the medicine. Music is just an incredible tool. And, there's so many artists that I carry close to my heart, that have really brought me so much goodness in my life.
Oh, thank you so much for being here. And everybody, stay tuned. We'll have another episode next Tuesday, Psychedelic Times. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you're feeling inspired, I'd appreciate it if you showed your love with a review. And check out my YouTube channel where you can find the video version of this podcast. You can also head to bethaweinstein.com to learn more about me and grab my free business growth trainings. Remember, you carry your own unique medicine, and your medicine is what we need for these times.